In a twist of fate, Mark found himself at the center of an extraordinary connection when a seemingly wild baby bat attached itself to him. Undeterred by the unusual bond, Mark embraced his newfound companion, feeding it insects and caring for it like a cherished pet. However, a year into this peculiar relationship, Mark was left utterly stunned when he made a shocking discovery about his companion. After a week of having his bat companion at home, Mark could barrel imagine his life without the creature that he had named Arya. He could have never guessed that it would be so fun having a non-common pet like this, and had even started to wonder why more people did not keep bats in the house. But there was still so much Mark did not know about the animal. His worries first started when Arya seemed to have less energy by the day. In the beginning, she was constantly active at night, never sitting still by the looks of things. She was even, on occasion, flying during the day. This was supposed to be a sign that a bat was doing well if Mark were to believe the forums he had been reading online. But Arya was not doing that anymore these past couple of days. She had actually mostly just been hanging out in his closet, spending as little energy as possible. He wanted to bring her to a vet and have the poor animal checked out. But this is where Mark encountered one of the first problems with having an exotic pet, one that could make life very difficult. Most of the local vets had no idea about how to take care of a bat or how to give it a proper checkup. They had never worked on these animals before, and therefore had never needed to learn about it. Mark called them all, but most of them told him that they were not too keen on taking a risk with this animal. And the ones who were willing needed Mark to sign a form that they were not responsible for anything bad happening. This did not exactly fill Mark with confidence, and thus he needed to consider alternative options. He cared too much about Arya to just have her die on the operating table of a vet who he knew was not qualified to work on her. But other options were not exactly easy to come by, and thus Mark searched all the corners of the internet for a possible solution. After a while, Mark finally came across a so-called bat sanctuary, which was located a couple of cities away. It would be a drive of about 5 hours, and Mark did not even know if that was possible with a bat. But he decided that calling the sanctuary was the least he could do. They would surely be able to give him some advice. As Mark described his situation to the expert on the other side of the line, he learned that the situation was actually fairly worrisome. The first thing he was informed about was that it was not good for a bat to be kept as a pet at all. They would have trouble getting the necessary movement space and nutrients in a standard house. The bat sanctuary was willing to have a look at Arya and also told Mark that a long drive was not going to put the nail in the coffin for the animal. They did not even want to charge him any money for the procedure. But they have one condition. After they had nursed Arya back to health, she would not go back home with Mark and stay at the sanctuary until she was ready to be released again. The idea alone nearly broke Mark's heart. In these past couple of weeks, he had really bonded with the animal. The thought of having to give it away broke his heart. He was also a rational person and knew that he did not really have a choice. Especially because, apparently, it was not good for Arya to live in his house. And maybe deep down, he had always realized this, but never wanted to admit to it. He took only a couple of minutes to come to his decision and call the sanctuary back to inform them that he would bring Arya by later that afternoon. He would start to prepare for the journey right away. He did not want to waste any time as his animal friend's health was at stake here. Every day he waited could be a day too long, and the expert also confirmed this. It seemed like a wise decision, but Mark could have never guessed what that day was going to have in store for him. He prepared the back of his car by making it as dark as possible and giving Arya a space to hang from. He also brought enough food and water for her, and hopefully that would sustain the animal for the 5-6 hour drive they were about to make. This drive also gave Mark a lot of time to think, mostly about how Faith had brought him and Arya together now, roughly 3 weeks ago. Mark had found Arya by complete coincidence one day. He was hiking in the nearby forest when he suddenly heard some strange sounds coming from the bushes. He speculated that it could be an animal, but none that he was able to recognize. But when he pushed away some of the leaves, something suddenly jumped out of the bushes right at him. Mark jumped back, but there was no way to drudge the assailant. He panicked for a couple of seconds until he saw what he was actually dealing with here. It was a rather large-looking bat that had jumped out of the vegetation and was now clinging onto his arm with all its strength. A very weird sensation that Mark had never experienced before. He had no idea what this bat was doing here and why it was active during the day. He did not know much about bats, but he was pretty sure that they were supposed to be nocturnal. He shook his arm a couple of times to try and get the bet off, but it was no use. He eventually concluded that this animal might need help and took it home. Mark was both amused and bewildered by Arya's initial behavior. Unlike the wild, skittish bats he had read about, Arya seemed remarkably comfortable in his home. She fluttered around with an air of curiosity, exploring corners and perches with an unexpected grace. At night, her activity peaked, showcasing her natural nocturnal instincts. Mark often found himself watching her, fascinated by her agile flights and keen senses, a nightly spectacle in the quiet of his living room. Determined to provide the best care for Arya, Mark dove into the depths of the internet, scouring forums and articles about bat care. He learned about their diet, habitat needs, and behavioral patterns. Each hour spent researching felt like unraveling a mystery. Gradually, Mark transformed from a novice into a knowledgeable caretaker, his home adapting to accommodate Arya's needs. It was a role he never anticipated, yet one he embraced wholeheartedly. As the days passed, Mark noticed an unspoken bond forming between him and Arya. She seemed to recognize his presence, responding to his movements and sounds. He was touched by the subtle ways she communicated, a flick of her wings, a tilt of her head. Their silent interactions were profound, creating a unique companionship. Mark found comfort in Arya's presence, a silent witness to his daily life, a steady constant in the shifting world around him. Mark often found himself in deep thought, reflecting on the silent understanding growing between him and Arya. Her presence brought a unique tranquility to his home. There were no demands, no expectations, just a quiet companionship that filled the spaces of his solitary life. Arya's silent flights around the room became a soothing routine, a peaceful end to his busy days. In her, Mark found an unexpected companion, one that asked for nothing but offered much in return. Initially, Mark dismissed the minor changes in Arya's behavior as her adapting to a new environment. She started spending more time in her designated roosting spot, her flights becoming less frequent. Mark noticed her increased lethargy, a stark contrast to her earlier vivacity. He reassured himself that it was just a phase, perhaps a natural adjustment. Yet, deep down, a small voice of concern began to whisper, wondering if there was more to these subtle changes than met the eye. Mark meticulously prepared for the journey to the bat sanctuary. He transformed the back of his car into a dark, cozy haven, hanging a soft cloth for Arya to cling to. Packing enough insects and water to keep her comfortable, he carefully placed her travel crate in a secure spot. As he started the car, he felt a mix of apprehension and hope. This journey was crucial for Arya's well-being, and he was determined to make it as smooth as possible. Throughout the drive, Mark's concern for Arya grew. She remained unusually quiet, barely moving in her crate. He stopped several times, checking to ensure she was still breathing and not in distress. Each time he opened the crate, Arya's eyes met his with a faint glimmer of recognition, but without her usual energetic response. The silent, long stretches of road gave Mark too much time to worry about her declining health. Upon arrival at the sanctuary, Mark was greeted with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. The staff, experienced in bat rehabilitation, were quick to take Arya for examination. Their doubtful glances towards Mark spoke volumes of their thoughts about a bat being kept as a pet. While he understood their concerns, a part of him felt defensive about the bond he had formed with Arya and the care he had provided. Sanctuary employees bombarded Mark with questions. They inquired about Arya's origin, her diet, and how he had been caring for her. Their questions, laced with a hint of skepticism, made Mark feel uneasy. He explained how Arya had attached herself to him unexpectedly and his efforts to provide her with a good home. Despite his honest intentions, he could sense their doubt, wondering if he had unknowingly contributed to her condition. Handing Arya over to the sanctuary staff, Mark felt a surge of mixed emotions. There was relief that she was finally getting professional care, but also a gnawing anxiety about the outcome. The staff's behaviour, though professional, had an underlying current of disapproval, making the atmosphere uncomfortable. As he watched them carry Arya away, his heart ached with worry and a sense of loss, yet he knew this was the best chance for her recovery. While waiting in the sanctuary's lobby, Mark overheard a conversation that piqued his concern. A doctor and an employee discussed Arya's condition in hushed tones, their words laced with surprise and urgency. Phrases like "never seen anything like it" and "quite unusual" floated to Mark's ears. His heart raced as he realized Arya's situation might be more complex than he thought. This accidental eavesdropping deepened his worry, making him feel more helpless. Driven by the snippets of conversation he had overheard, Mark approached the sanctuary staff for answers. His questions, however, were met with evasive and vague responses. Each reply seemed carefully worded, skirting around the specifics of Arya's condition. Their reluctance to share information only fueled Mark's frustration and concern. He felt a growing sense of unease, suspecting that Arya's case was more mysterious and serious than he had initially believed. Mark's persistent questions and visible anxiety made the sanctuary staff uncomfortable. They politely, yet firmly, asked him to leave, citing sanctuary policies and the need to focus on Arya's care. Mark sensed an unspoken tension in the air as he was escorted to the exit. The door closing behind him felt symbolic, leaving him physically and emotionally cut off from Arya and the answers he desperately sought. Mark couldn't shake off his concerns about Arya. As evening approached, he made a bold decision to return to the sanctuary. Slipping in unnoticed, he moved with quiet determination, driven by a mix of worry and curiosity. His heart pounded as he navigated the dimly lit corridors, every step taking him closer to uncovering the truth about Arya's mysterious condition and the sanctuary's secretive behaviour. Hiding in the shadows, Mark witnessed an unexpected scene. A group of individuals in formal attire, including a scientist, arrived in haste. They spoke briefly with the sanctuary staff before swiftly taking Arya, now in a secure transport crate. The urgency and secrecy of their actions were alarming. Mark's mind raced with questions as he watched them depart. The suddenness of it all left him stunned, his concern for Arya intensifying. Mark's heart raced as he followed the vehicle carrying Arya. With a mix of fear and determination, he navigated through the traffic, keeping a safe distance. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions: worry for Arya, confusion about the situation, and a growing sense of urgency. He knew he couldn't lose them. Arya's well-being and the mystery of her condition depended on this pursuit. The car finally stopped at a secluded research facility, its modern facade hiding the secrets within. As Mark parked his car a discreet distance away, he took in the high-security gates and surveillance cameras. This place was more than just a lab. It was a fortress of science, shrouded in mystery. Mark's curiosity intensified, along with his apprehension about what they might be doing with Arya inside. Mark approached the lab, but was immediately met with resistance. The security was tight, and his requests to enter were firmly denied. He tried reasoning, explaining his connection to Arya, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. Each rejection only strengthened his resolve. Mark knew he needed to find another way to gain access, to understand what was happening with Arya inside those walls. Undeterred, Mark persisted. He made phone calls, sent emails, and even tried reaching out through social media. His efforts finally paid off when a sympathetic lab employee agreed to arrange a brief meeting with a representative. Relief washed over Mark, mixed with anxiety. This meeting was his chance to get answers, to understand the mystery surrounding Arya's sudden departure from the sanctuary. During his brief tour of the lab's public areas, Mark's eyes were wide open, absorbing every detail. The facility was a hive of activity, with researchers moving briskly, their conversations filled with scientific jargon. Through the glimpses of high-tech equipment and busy labs, Mark's suspicions deepened. Arya was clearly more than just an ordinary bat to warrant such attention. He knew he had to uncover the truth. In the sterile meeting room of the lab, Mark faced a panel of experts. Their explanations about Arya and the lab's interest in her were peppered with technical terms and vague references. Mark sensed they were withholding information, giving him only fragments of the truth. Their evasive answers left him more determined than ever to unearth the full story behind Arya's unique condition and the lab's mysterious interest. After the meeting, Mark sat in his car, replaying the conversation in his mind. He sifted through their words, searching for hidden meanings and clues. The fragmented information painted a confusing picture, but Mark was sure of one thing. The lab was deeply invested in Arya for reasons they weren't disclosing. The puzzle was complex, but Mark was committed to putting the pieces together. Mark's frustration mounted as he realized the enormity of the mystery surrounding Arya. The lab's cryptic behavior and partial truths hinted at a deeper, more significant story that he was only scratching the surface of. Every new piece of information seemed to lead to more questions than answers. The more he pondered, the more the mystery deepened, fueling his determination to uncover the truth. Undaunted by the obstacles, Mark's resolve to uncover the truth about Arya's condition grew stronger. He couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was at stake. Arya was not just a bat. She was a key to something much larger, something the lab was desperately trying to keep hidden. Mark knew he couldn't let it go. He owed it to Arya to find out why she was so important. As Mark drove away from the lab, his mind raced with thoughts and theories. He knew the lab held the answers he desperately sought, and he couldn't give up now. His connection to Arya, once a simple bond between a man and a wild creature, had evolved into a quest for truth. Mark was determined to unravel the mystery no matter how deep he had to dig. After days of relentless effort, Mark's determination finally paid off. He secured a meeting with a senior lab researcher, someone with the authority and knowledge he sought. Mark entered the lab once again, this time with a sense of purpose. He was not just a concerned pet owner anymore. He was a man on a mission, ready to break through the barriers of secrecy surrounding Arya's condition. In a small, stark room, Mark faced the senior researcher. The air was tense as he pushed for answers, his questions direct and probing. The researcher, initially guarded, began to reveal layers of information, albeit cautiously. Each revealed fact felt like a small victory in Mark's quest for the truth, yet he sensed there was much more beneath the surface, hidden behind carefully chosen words. During the intense discussion, the researcher divulged that Arya's case was exceptionally unique, but stopped short of revealing why. They spoke of unusual biological markers and behavioral patterns hinting at a rare anomaly. However, the full extent of Arya's uniqueness and its implications remained shrouded in ambiguity. Mark grasped onto these partial revelations, aware that the complete truth was still just out of reach. The lab's reluctance to provide complete information only heightened Mark's suspicions. Each evasive answer and half-truth added to his determination to uncover the full story. Mark couldn't help but feel that Arya was at the center of something significant, something the lab was desperate to keep hidden. His resolve to find out why Arya was so important to them intensified with every unanswered question. As Mark left the lab, his mind was racing, trying to connect the dots of Arya's mystery. The partial revelations hinted at a larger, more complex picture. He started to piece together the puzzle, combining what he had learned from the sanctuary and the lab. Though the full picture was still unclear, Mark was closer to understanding Arya's true identity and significance, and he was determined to uncover it. Mark, armed with determination, confronted the head researcher of the lab. He demanded full disclosure about Arya's condition and the lab's interest in her. The atmosphere was charged with tension as Mark stood firm, his voice unwavering. The researcher, after a moment of contemplation, seemed to recognize Mark's unwavering resolve. Reluctantly, he began to unveil the layers of secrecy that had shrouded Arya's true condition. The researcher, with a tone of reluctant admittance, began to share startling details about Arya's species. It was revealed that she belonged to a rare and little-known species, her characteristics baffling even to experienced scientists. Arya's presence in the area was an anomaly, a fact that had piqued the lab's interest. Mark listened intently, absorbing the gravity of the revelation, his mind racing with the implications of what he was hearing. The researcher delved into Arya's origin, explaining the rarity and significance of her species. Though specifics about her native habitat were omitted, it was clear that Arya was far from her natural environment. This information shed light on why her behavior and biology had seemed so puzzling. Mark's understanding of Arya deepened as he realized she was more than just an unusual companion. She was a living enigma. The lab emphasized Arya's remarkable survival and adaptation in an environment far removed from her natural habitat. Her ability to thrive in unfamiliar surroundings was unprecedented and of great interest to the researchers. This aspect of her story painted Arya not just as a rarity, but as a resilient survivor, adapting against all odds. Mark felt a new level of respect and awe for his winged companion. Mark left the meeting feeling overwhelmed by the enormity of Arya's situation. The revelation of her uniqueness and her importance in the realm of wildlife conservation weighed heavily on him. He realized that Arya was not just a bat he had grown fond of. She was a critical part of a much larger natural puzzle. This discovery changed not only how he saw Arya, but also his understanding of the delicate balance of nature. Mark found himself immersed in his study, surrounded by a sea of books and stacks of research notes dedicated to bats. As he delved deeper into Arya's story, he grasped the profound implications of her presence. She wasn't merely a bat he had grown attached to. She embodied a critical role in the intricate web of wildlife conservation, emphasizing nature's intricate design and the interconnectedness of all living beings. With every passing day, Mark's internal struggle intensified. He grappled with a moral dilemma that consumed his thoughts. Should he selfishly hold on to Arya, ensuring her safety and comfort in his care? Or should he make the agonizing decision to release her, allowing her to fulfill her natural role in the wild, where she could contribute to the delicate balance of the ecosystem? Over time, Mark gradually came to terms with the undeniable truth. Arya's rightful place wasn't within the confines of his home, but out in the wild, where she could play her vital part in maintaining the harmony of the natural world. He realized that as much as he cherished her presence, he owed it to Arya and the ecosystem to set her free. Mark devoted hours to preparing himself mentally for the inevitable farewell. He knew that the day would arrive when he'd have to bid Arya goodbye, and it weighed heavily on his heart. Nevertheless, he understood that it was a necessary step, a sacrifice he had to make for her well-being and the greater good of the environment. As the approaching departure date cast its shadow over Mark, his emotions ran a tumultuous course. Sadness engulfed him at the thought of parting ways with Arya, the little creature who had brought so much joy into his life. Yet, beneath the sorrow, he felt a profound sense of pride, knowing that he had played a role in preparing her for a life where she would fulfill a far-reaching purpose within the intricate tapestry of nature. Mark's heart ached as he approached Arya's enclosure for one last visit. Their connection was undeniable, built on countless shared moments. He watched her hanging gracefully, her wings glistening in the soft light. Their bond was a testament to the beauty of the wild. Arya sensed Mark's presence and chirped softly, as if understanding the inevitable farewell. Mark reached out, gently stroking her fur, whispering words of gratitude for their time together. He knew this was for the best, for her and her species. Tears welled up in Mark's eyes as he reminisced about their adventures together. From their first meeting to the countless nights under the stars, they had forged an unbreakable connection. Mark cherished every memory, knowing they would sustain him during her absence. Arya nuzzled Mark's hand, a gesture of affection and understanding. It was as if she too recognized the significance of her return to the wild. Mark took a deep breath, resolving to support her in this final selfless act of love. As Mark left Arya's enclosure, he couldn't help but smile through his tears. Their farewell was bittersweet, but he knew he had made the right choice. Arya deserved to be free, and Mark would always treasure the profound bond they shared. In the days that followed, Mark worked tirelessly alongside the researchers, preparing Arya for her journey. He admired their dedication to conservation and the welfare of all creatures. Together, they ensured that Arya would have the best chance of thriving in her natural habitat. On the eve of Arya's release, Mark stood at the edge of the forest, a mix of emotions swirling within him. He watched as Arya took flight, disappearing into the night. The wind carried her away, but the memories of their time together would forever remain etched in his heart. Mark continued to support conservation efforts, inspired by his time with Arya. He knew that their bond had not only enriched his life, but also contributed to the preservation of a rare and precious species. Years later, Mark received news that a colony of Arya's species had successfully established itself in its natural habitat. He couldn't help but smile, knowing that Arya's journey had come full circle, and her legacy would live on for generations to come. As Mark looked up at the starry sky one night, he felt a sense of peace. Arya's spirit seemed to dance among the stars, a reminder of the enduring connection between humans and the wild, and the importance of protecting the wonders of the natural world.